Zoom. Okay, it's 6 o'clock. I want to call the meeting to order. So first item of business on December the 2nd's meeting is the approval of November the 4th's minutes. And the fact that we had no quorum, so we have no minutes, other than the fact we didn't call the meeting to order on November the 18th. So has everybody had a chance to look at the November 4th minutes? And if so, are there any changes, comments? And if none, do I hear a motion to accept?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor? Roll call?
Mr. Yule,
Yes.
Miss Mazeka,
Yes.
Miss O'Neill,
Yes.
Miss Wozniak.
Same.
4 in the affirmative. Okay, minutes approved.
3 in the affirmative and 1
3 and 1 abstain.
3. Oh, one's abstained.
Yep, Sammy abstained.
Wasn't
Oh, that's right. Sorry. Sam abstained. Yeah, she wasn't. All right. The next item is the town manager's request, capital request for 2022. Town manager, floor is yours.
There she is.
I've come back. I'm sorry, I stepped away. Good evening, everybody. How is the Finance Committee this evening? All smile faces, I
You're
hope.
ducky.
Did you have a nice Thanksgiving?
Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. Well, I wanted to actually go through my capital requests, and as usual, some of these will be familiar sounding to you if I had submitted them in the previous year, and some of them may be new. So the first one that I would like to bring up is something that has some familiarity. Applied for a disability grant with the Mass Office for Disabilities after we formed a disability commission for the first time in this town. And we had taken stock of the fact that we don't necessarily have all of our buildings with the Architectural Access Board and the like. So that grant was not successful last year, but after speaking with the granting authorities, I understood that if I can kind of hone in, instead of making it a multi-pronged grant application, which included the bandstand and included the senior center ramps and the town hall ramps, we have a better shot at this. So I have before you ADA upgrades to the Memorial Hall. I've done a little bit more homework on what could possibly happen with that. If you're familiar with our building, which I know Chairman Yule just came in the building, you would know that that particular ramp goes back to the 1980s, and it was part of the last real handicap accessibility, I'd call it a large scale endeavor that had to do with infrastructure. And that was part of a federal HUD grant called Project Access. Since the 1980s, it is obviously, it's almost 75 feet in length. It's weathered all kinds of storms and salt and the like. And what I've done this year is thought about the fact that I've seen many people struggle in wheelchairs, not to get necessarily up into the building in wonderful weather when it's sunny and all of that. But if they are by themselves, the pitch is, or the grade of the actual ramp is not correct. It has a lot of cracks in it. You'll see that Tim is trying to help me show you some of the actual ramp itself. Our railings are not necessarily considered code compliant via the Architectural Access Board. So, you know, you can see that there's a lot of wear and tear that the ramp has had. So rather than thinking about just repairing what exists there and leaving it out into the elements and having the feedback that I got from state officials about trying to improve the grant that I'm seeking, this particular project is going to initially focus on the design and engineering associated with not only replacing that ramp, but actually creating a whole new entranceway to the back of the building, and that it will be enclosed. And the initial company that, or architects that I approached to give increased credence to our application and helped draw our estimates and give some idea of what could be possible. Now, this is all very preliminary. We don't have the grant yet, but obviously if we do get the grant, I would still need money as a capital project. But what this is seeking to do, I'm looking for this year to do a phase one. And the phase one would be an ask of about $74,000 to have the Boston Bay Architects Association, which has been working with our town on the project of the library for the historic conservation or historic commission project on repairing the wall and all the windows there. Ron Alex from that architectural forum had provided me with estimates, and I've given them to you in your packets, along with the grant that I had written so that you'd have a better understanding of that. But there, the phase one, which would include initial investigation and survey and preliminary design objectives by the architect, would amount to about $35,050. And then they call their phase two design fee, which would actually get the project ready to go out to bid and to do construction. And that way we'd have a really solid understanding of what's the design we settle for in the town, what would it look like, and how would we get it off the ground into a construction project. And that would be another $39,650. Now, the last part for construction, if you look at that, those two fees, in addition to what they say the preliminary estimates for enclosing the whole thing in glass, and also creating a very picturesque entry to the back and modifying that. That project in its entirety is about $352,000. Now, these are very rudimentary sketchings, but it's an idea. You saw the way that the ramp goes back and forth, snakes back and forth. What would be wonderful, and I've seen a former board member struggle in going out in the elements in the middle of the night after a board meeting. Our Disability Commission has two people who are dependent on wheelchairs. And whenever there's inclement weather, it becomes very dangerous. And we don't always have our DPW to be there at the moment that people have to exit or enter into the building, especially when there is severe weather. So this would actually try to enclose the back, actually change up the entire look of the back, make it much better, improve the incline, make it architectural board compliant, and then also create a new entryway to the back of the building, including stepping up if someone's capable of doing that into the back of the building. So that is, a project that has like two phases to it. And if I'm fortunate enough to receive funding from the Massachusetts Office for Disability, that could be as much as $250,000. That is what I've actually applied for. And so that $352,000 estimate obviously will be offset by that. So keep your fingers crossed. I'm hoping this month to hear. In the event that we don't hear, I do think we should still move forward with at least the design and engineering, and then really find out what it is that we want to do. And I think there's some great opportunities to go forward with this type of project. And I think it has obviously a lot of merit, and it also is something that we would be legally required to do. So that would be the first project. I don't know if anybody has any questions about that. But again, there's nothing in stone here. This is doing the homework ahead of time. I do think that the design and engineering phase 1 and 2, that's solid. That's coming from the architect themselves. They know and had come out to visit and saw what we had for a potential project. But the rest of it would be, determined if we can move forward with it, if we get the grant. And even if we don't, then next year we can talk about actually putting it into our capital project. We might know even in terms of the capital plan, we might know as early as next fall, what that overall construction figure might be. And potentially if we have monies in free cash and the like, we might be able to offset some of that. But I would be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have about that particular project.
Anybody from the committee have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I love the idea of the glass enclosure over that, just for the sake of, that's going to be a big money saver down the road too, especially, with the inclement weather. So I think it looks great.
Thank you. Thank you. I do think it will be really very good too. And I appreciate that. Again, sometimes what we find ourselves doing, particularly with last year, was, trying to take a step forward do some of this time intensive application to a major state, grant authority. If we're fortunate to get it, great. We've had great success with a lot of the applications that we've submitted and the projects we've submitted, but we do have occasions where we have to actually make improvements to that application. So I believe this is one way to make an improvement, and also to show good faith to the fact that we have established a disability commission who does try to come into this building, albeit before COVID, but we hope to return to that in the future. And I think it would be really great. So I appreciate the committee's support for that particular project. The next project I have, sorry.
Just a quick question. If this is done, are we going to be getting rid of the door on the side of the building, the one that opposite N&J Donuts there?
No,
not. You're leaving that. Oh, I just wanted.
Yeah, that would be leaving. Yep. No, this is strictly for the back.
Okay.
Yeah, so that I would leave. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
In a perfect world, the 250, jumping ahead here, we're going to put down the 74.7 is the first part of our cost of the project going forward. Then phase 2, there'll still be a shortfall, so I'm assuming of about 77,300. In other words, we're going to be, if you add those two numbers together, our share over the period of the project would be about 152,000 if these numbers hold in a grant of 250.
Correct.
The total project, like you said, is 352 less the grant of 250. Our share is 152 of the 74.7 requested here is basically half of that 152 initially over the phase 1, and then phase 2 be the balance. Am I correct?
Yes. And I think, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think that if we're not successful with this, second round of application with this particular project, then I think you all know me well enough that I will find another source, potentially, maybe for the construction piece of it. This is one particular application and project that I think has real excellent merit to be funded, but in case it isn't, I will continue to look in other directions in case we still want to proceed with it, but may not have that offset. So, but nothing ventured, nothing gained, and nothing put before you with some background can, start to move forward unless we've had discussions and we make it a priority. So I do think it's a worthy priority. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the question.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? If none, then back to you, Town Manager, on the second item.
Thank you. The next item I had is, hold on one second. No, that is it. Okay. I believe it's the town inspection vehicle. One of the things that we had done is identify in our overall fleet. I know the police have done a very good job where we incorporate the rotating of cruisers out after they reach a certain mileage. We have been taking stock of our fire vehicles as well and our DPW vehicles. But there was one area that sort of got left off the map prior to when I came here as town manager, and that was the area of looking at the fleet in terms of inspection vehicles. We have quite a few inspectors themselves who have to go out, whether it's the plumbing inspector, the wiring inspector, our building commissioner, our board of health agent, our assessors, the assistant assessors. And right now, thanks to the goodness of listening to our request last year by this committee and also the funding by the townspeople, we were able to put on the docket that we really need more than one very old vehicle to be able to offer, especially in this era of COVID and wanting to keep people safe. We should have at least 2 inspection vehicles. So in a prudent fashion, last year, we figured we would bring on a new vehicle, which we did fund, for about $26,000. They're a fuel efficient Ford Escape, I believe. I put a little picture, I think, in there to show you. And the current vehicle that was going to help offset. So we still have 2 vehicles now. Well, this one's going to be delivered very shortly. But the current vehicle that this was going to replace was our Ford Explorer that had 113,600 miles on it, which does not have great fuel efficiency. and it has had a lot of mechanical problems. So last year, we're bringing on one vehicle, and then this year, I was going to come back before, and so that we have two newer vehicles, and hopefully we can get into the same habit that other departments have, which is to rotate and to make sure we have it on a capital plan for replacement. And so this is asking for $26,000, the same amount that we asked for last year, in hopes that we can actually improve the number of vehicles we have for our inspectional team. This makes it a very chaotic type of scheduling for our inspectors of any department to go out and use one vehicle. And so this also puts a burden on our inspectors, in particular our full-time ones, or even our relegated directors of departments, to go out and do these kinds of inspections. People want to know who's approaching them, and if people are approaching in their own vehicles, it can be unsettling to residents because they don't know who's coming on their property sometimes to look at something, and this will help identify and build confidence that residents know that they have a town employee who's coming to do the work that they should be doing. So this is the same kind of vehicle which has actually worked very good in the DPW. You'll see the two little white cars. They're all-wheel drive, so they can go into places that have terrain that can be challenging, and we have plenty of that around town. Ask our assessors anytime they're going out in the field when they're looking at personal property of large-scale solar arrays or new developments that aren't paved yet. They have to be able to go into all kinds of weather. So that would be the request for this particular year, and I'll answer any questions if you have it.
Ready? None?
I just have one.
Sure.
I was wondering about how much, like if you have any idea, are we paying right now in mileage reimbursement for the inspectors?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but you're right. That does happen, and that is a problem. That's one of the reasons I feel we need to have one of the vehicles,
absolutely.
because we are putting out monies for that. And believe it or not, when someone is, I call it ping-ponging back and forth throughout the town on a given inspection day and looking at multiple projects, you can easily, go 100, 150 miles across town and back and forth to the town hall and then back out. So I think that it is one of those things that I'd be more than happy to try to look to provide the committee after this meeting, and particularly you, committee member Lamont, and I would to do that for you. So I would be more than happy, but you're right. Thank you for bringing that attention. I think that's a good reason why we also can save money on that front.
Great, thanks so much.
No problem.
Any other questions? All right, if none, move on to item 3.
The item that I'm about to talk about also relates to having split apart the disability types of projects that I had put together as one project last year. And this particular project has to do with ADA upgrades to the Senior Social Center. The project would include both design and reconstruction of the handicap ramps, in particular the back ramp. As you can see with this particular photograph, it's been patched and repatched and then more patched, but it is something that actually needs to be redone in its entirety. The difference between this project and obviously the Memorial Hall is this particular ramp is used very frequently for our seniors when we're back to having our lunches to come through the back door in the main parking lot. Deliveries are made this way, and also our Meals on Wheels that used to exist here was being done there. So now our drive-through delivery mails, while we're dealing with this pandemic, has also taken place in this area. So again, we're looking to make the railings code compliant. The pitch on this is not as severe as the one on the town hall, but I mean, obviously you can see that the ramp is in need of assistance. So the request for this also has embedded in it handicap door opening buttons, excuse me. We don't have those. So that would make both the front and the back ramps have those as well. So the ask for this to do is $21,498. And those were cost estimates that were put together by our DPW director, former director, as well as my department looking up the cost for doing electronic door openers. And I really don't have too much more to say. I know in your packets you have actually more pictures that show the substantial patching that was done. That one picture we put up, I think, doesn't necessarily do it as much justice as when you look at how severe and need it is. And I would consider this to be another top priority of, not a large scale means of asking for it, but something that we should definitely include in our capital plan to get done this year.
I agree.
Questions of the committee?
I agree.
None? On item 4?
Sure. The next one also is another disability project, and that has to do with the making the bandstand itself on the Common, Jocelyn Park and Common, ADA compliant with both a walkway and handicapped parking to be able to access the grounds. This is the project that you are more familiar with, that I had really highlighted to the grant authorities. But once we discovered that it's best to kind of separate them out, and knowing that we're actually doing some design and engineering and visioning for the Main Street, it made more sense to put the Memorial Town Hall, which is used the most as a town building, primary in terms of asking for funding for a grant authority. But I would like to keep this on the radar. It's a $146,802 project. It was looked at by our former DPW director and junior engineer. This would include walkways, especially for people who have limited ability physically, whether they're on a walker, a walking cane, or whether they are in a wheelchair. Right now, it's all grass, and it's very hard for anybody who has a dependency for or a need to be accommodated in that way. And we do have people who've worked in town with a lot of our different cultural and community organizations like the Lions Club. And, we've had issues where those people who have limited physical ability to get up and be participative with those community organizations, it has been risky to them to be lifted onto the bandstand. So this project, and I know we've sent out information on it previously, would include a ramp that is made very aesthetically to complement the bandstand so that there is handicap accessibility for anybody who may use the bandstand as a person who might want to be participating in a band ensemble, or, like I said, any other number of things. And it would include walkways that would be aesthetically circling the actual bandstand, where we now have the beautiful benches and the big flowering pots. And then the other proportion of this project is to actually make handicap parking. Right now, we have only along the street the breakdown lane, the emergency breakdown lane. That's how people park to get into Jocelyn Park. So what we would like to do is take some of the property in the back and create actual designated handicap parking. I do believe we will get to this project someday in the future, but I wanted to keep it on our radar, and I was putting that out in fiscal year 23. I can answer any questions if you have them.
Any questions, town manager, on this project? If none.
Thank you.
Item 5.
Okay, and the next actual several capital projects that I was going to speak to have to do with the green communities projects. And the only reason I want to just go over them quite quickly is because I want to just focus on the main one that would be this year. But we've learned some things about our green communities grant that I had submitted, and we had become eligible. And so last year we received our first annual funding assistance, and that was in the amount of $166,000. And the projects that are being done at this moment, you'll see a large container truck that's out in the parking lot of the municipal parking area. And that is because the senior center is undergoing a transformation for LED lighting. They've already completed that, and they're moving on to the library to replace all the lighting there with LED fixtures. And then they will go to the fire department headquarters and do that as well. And so when that is all, and it has to be completed by the next grant cycle, which is going to be coming up at the beginning, mid-February. So once that's done, we will all be putting in for another round of funding assistance. And so we are eligible each year. The funding level started out very high in the past because there were less communities. And so sometimes some communities would receive up to $400,000 to, say, put in street LED lighting. Our town took our initiative rather than waiting for us to become eligible as a grant participant. We took that project on our own. So we have other needs to make our community energy efficient. So the first year we were focusing with that $166,000. So all of those projects are being done with really no cost to the town. It's very minimal. We had, I think, I can't remember at the top, I don't have it right in front of me, but small amount. But each year I try to break up the overall energy plan so that it would not be too burdensome to us to have to incorporate into our capital plan. So typically those large scale funding dollars have shrunk a little bit. Sometimes about 200 to 250,000 is the typical. And now they've got more communities. So I estimated about 200,000 would be the area that we could be comfortable with in actually executing projects each year. So this particular year, I'm putting together a package when I have to apply in February for about $247,598. And one of the things I discovered once we became eligible and I was doing the first round is that they have a lot of flexibility. Initially in the energy plan, we had, each year which project we were going to do. So one of the things they like to see is diversity in the types of programs and the ones projects you put forward. And also the payback. Obviously, the more you can get projects done more quickly that have a quicker payback in terms of the energy cost savings per year, then the better it is. And they like to see that. So even though I provided you with 5-year plan last year, there's some tweaking because I didn't expect the library, senior center, and the fire department to be done this year. So now I had them on a different year that was built out. So now I've changed all of those numbers and I've changed the projects. So this coming year for that 247,598, I would be anticipating that more than likely we would put the Clara Barton School LED lighting project, which would be $150,809, and also the Clara Barton School boiler replacement, which is about $96,789. Now, I know that the school department came before you with facilities talking about the middle school boiler. Remember that some of these projects were looked at by the green communities experts for what could yield higher energy efficiency savings for the town. So both those projects have merit. They might be funded in a different way. And that's probably why you didn't hear about the Clara Barton School boiler from them, because it's been considered, part of this hopeful green communities funding. So that would be this year. Those would be the two projects, and that the annual savings to the town would be in the amount of $21,844 with just those two projects being done. And if we can get it with very little input from us, which this would actually be, by their standards, typically covered almost 100%. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that will happen. And if it not, will be a smaller amount that would be due for our community. In 2023,
Could I go back to this one here?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, we're applying for the grant in February, and FY 22 ends June 30th of 21. Am I right? Okay. So when do we know if the grant was awarded to us?
So last year they asked, because they already have us in the queue, so to speak.
Right.
They already have our full 5-year energy plan, and so it sounds like we're applying, and it's very different than other grant programs, in the sense that you're applying, they do a very quick turnaround to let you know how much to anticipate. And then we backdoor whatever the projects are to meet the amount that they give us. So they might come back and say, there's 189,000 this year. You figure out which projects you like to do.
Okay.
Us. Let us determine whether we think those are, the best projects for you to do. And then, from there, we'll finalize it. And then we start the whole process again, getting those projects done for next year. So you're right. It sounds like, last year, I think I wound up finalizing it in February. And by March, we knew that they had approved it. And then I was, looking to coordinate with the actual engineering company, energy efficiency company, excuse me, to actually start the work. And that's what's been transpiring this fall. A lot of things got a little bit delayed because of the pandemic, but this project has been moving along.
So now, if let's assume that it's these two, the Barton lighting and the Barton boiler that are going to be done in FY22. Does that particular piece of it have to be completed by June 30th of?
No, next year, by June 30th of next year. So
of 21.
We're asking
of 21
for the funding.
or 22 of 21, right?
Of 22.
Oh, okay.
Of 22. So they're on a different schedule than we are. Where it's in hours, and they're making sure in advance they'll approve us for something.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Okay.
I'm glad you're keeping track.
Yes, it's not easy. It was not an easy grant to do. Trust me, it was this big. It was a lot of things, and my staff and I worked on it. And I know there was some glazing over at one point or another to try to get the figures right. But despite that, they do offer some flexibility, and the flexibility allows us to do the best projects forward. So
okay,
with the best return. And of course, looking at what we, have for the types of projects, in addition to the ones that are being done right now in the buildings, we also have variable frequency drives that are put in our boiler systems or our HVAC and boiler systems in the schools right now. We have idle types of energy efficiencies being done, at least on a couple of our police cruisers. Those were small ones to try to use up all $166,000. So,
thank you.
so that's a good project.
Wasn't it a 5-year grant that you received last year? $1 million something, $1 million?
Yes, in the end, it will amount to over that. Yes, but they give it to us on an annual basis, and because some of our needs may fluctuate. They did do an overall assessment of all of our boilers and our lighting and the energy efficiency within our buildings, and that gave them some ideas to give back to us to what we could consider prioritizing. But we all know that sometimes equipment doesn't last to the point of when you're all ready to actually replace it. And so we found that out rather quickly with the Oxford Community Center boiler that became an emergency that we had to replace quickly. And that is one of the boilers. We still have a whole nother boiler that will eventually need to be addressed. But having said that, hopefully the projects that we embark on now, can wait if they haven't been funded to the next grant cycle, which next year, a very similar 247,598 as well. We would be looking to do the following projects that originally wanted to do the first year, but the granting authority said, no, we like these 3 projects. So I'm not going to argue with someone who's going to pay 100% for something, right? So in 2023, we would hope to anticipate we'd get the LED lighting for the animal shelter, the bandstand, the cemetery building, the community center, and a library boiler replacement, and the town hall LED interior lights. So that would come to that total figure that I had put out there. And what we anticipate is excuse me, I was incorrect on the 247. It actually is 285,562. We didn't carry that down into that column, so I apologize for that. But the, project grant offset, if we are approved on that given year for the types of projects I put forward, would be $225,932, which basically means that you subtract that from the 285, and that would be our contribution. But annual savings there again is about $25,000 a year in energy cost savings if we were to complete these projects. So each year we're building in savings, and some projects build in savings more quickly than others.
In this case, with our share being 59,000, the savings annually being 24, about a 2.4 year payback.
Mhm.
It would be then free money to us at that point, savings wise. And of course, utility costs would go up, so it may be short as 2 year payback. But then
Correct.
Rates are going forward. So that's
Yeah, I mean, just to give you an idea, I mean, just having changed all our highway lights, even though we did that ourselves, and I worked with our DPW director to make sure we got it done as quickly as possible so that we would get rebates as well as the cost savings once we converted. Rebates themselves were worth almost $68,000. And then chasing them down is my job, right? But then the other piece of it was the annual cost savings is about equal to that energy cost. So that's about $68,000 on an annual basis. So if you start saying 68,000 and 24,000 and this year and 21,000, pretty soon, you're up over $100,000 a year that goes automatically to your bottom line. And you can count on that type of energy cost savings per year. So it's definitely the right way to go. And as the chairman points out, some of those cost savings might actually increase depending on what's happening in the general environment with energy efficiency and overall costs for utilities. So I think it's worth talking about. And not everyone remembers what we talked about last year. So I thought it was important to kind of put it out there this year.
Good job.
And then if nobody has questions on that, I was going to go to the fiscal year 24 projects, which are going to amount to about 260,000, 710,000, and they would include actually building or replacing a community center steam trap, which goes to our boiler. It would also include a boiler replacement, and which is amounting to about 217,000, and a fire department north, the north station now that we have opened, that would cost about 21,979 to change the lighting there, and also to input townwide building controls, about $1,800. So altogether, that 260,000, a little over, would be offset by about $230,220 from the green communities. So again, our contribution would be about $30,490 in fiscal year 24. And the annual cost savings for those items, because boilers don't yield as much as LED lighting, would be about $9,954. And then fiscal year 25 would be the last. That included everything that we couldn't get to for the other years. So that one looks really impressive in terms of a number because it has one of the largest costs to do an LED lighting replacement, and that involves both the middle school and the high school. The lighting cost to replace at the middle school is $352,000. $352,906. I apologize. And we'd also include, oh, no, I thought I was at the end. I'm not at the end. I apologize. We're only on year 4, not 5. So I apologize. This would include the lighting for the DPW office building for $26,883. The police department headquarters LED lighting, $84,596, and the middle school LED lighting, $352,000. That would be for a grand total of $464,385. If we were to get the grant, their incentives for doing that kind of LED lighting from the utility companies, along with the grant funding agency, we would anticipate that we might not have to pay anything for that if we get that substantial amount. So we would actually hopefully have zero costs related to that. Now you say, why wouldn't we do it now? It's not up to us. It's up to the grant funding agency of which ones we pick. So that would generate almost $42,560 in annualized energy cost savings. And then the last one in fiscal year 26, that includes the high school, which is a very costly $579,000 project. Rural Field to have energy efficiency lighting there is about $103,000. To do some HVAC controls here at the town hall, that's about $87,000. To do Chafee School LED lighting, that's $146,000. There's some building panel infrared heating, garage at the DPW LED replacement lighting, some garage bay waste oil heaters at $20,000. So there's quite a bit of projects that we have, and that one, of course, amounts to about $993,000. And the offset, if we were to get the entire offset that was put into our energy plan from the utility companies in the green communities, we would be offset by $690,000 plus $1,000. So we may be responsible, if we would do all those projects, about $303,183. But the annualized savings there are pretty impressive. It's $181,072. So if we take all of our 5-year plan, put it together, you can see that, we're well over, $1.4 million in projects, but then our savings do compound. So that's the green energy community thing. You guys all good with?
Yes. Now I know.
Okay. The next item is something I did bring up last year, and we put it off, and that has to do with town hall document scanning and destruction project. The town hall is really basically nearing its capacity for storage of documents. The vault is definitely at capacity in the building. This is a project that many towns have taken on because in accordance with changing of state laws, we do have record retention laws that we do have to meet, and we can't just get rid of documents. But we also do have documents now that once we had to keep, that we don't have to keep anymore. And to go through volumes and volumes of records, and I'm talking about file cabinets that, as far as the eye can see, that we have in the town hall basement and up on the 3rd floor here that has 2 areas that we can create storage. It's time that we actually really push forward to make as many departments as possible to become much more electronically, driven. Now, I can tell you that between the Board of Selectmen's office, the town manager's office, we have been doing that, and we have spent an enormous amount of time purging and getting permission from the Secretary of State's office to remove documents we no longer need to store and to actually organize and scan. And I did have a scanning project where we were doing that for Board of Selectmen files and town manager files. But this particular project, I would like to focus on the Office of Land Management, where you have very strict laws for retention, because someone may need a building permit now, and 10 years from now, they might want to see what was actually done on that permit. And same thing with septic designs and plans. And they have these very large, scale to scale engineering plans. All of those things have to be kept. And we need to have a company that can work with that department to really come up with a whole system on better organizing those documents and getting them scanned, and then removing whatever documents that we don't need. And that is not a cheap process, and it's not an easy process. You need people who are very literate in record retention law, and you don't want people just coming in willy-nilly and throwing things out. But you do want to have something that amounts to better organization. Now, the benefits to doing that are, I think, very obvious. One, the department personnel who have a very small footprint upstairs, I think would welcome the improved organization that might be imposed by a company that is used to creating organization for these types of departments. And once we open up fully back to the public after the pandemic, hopefully wanes, obviously it lends a sense of confidence in residents when they approach a department to see not piles and piles of, different types of documents that they need to have access to, but don't always have a place for them. So if we can put a lot of that online, it would be very good. So the ask on this particular project, which would be, I would be seeking for fiscal year 22, the upcoming financial year, is $57,128. As you can see in your packet, we do have one estimate. There aren't a lot of companies that do this, but there's, some. This again is not necessarily the only company that we would be looking at. Obviously, we would put it out to a request for proposals, and hopefully we'd be able to make it go forward. But after speaking with the staff of the Office of Land Management, they would be extremely pleased if we could do this. I could answer any questions if you have.
Okay, I just to understand. The town manager's office and the Board of Selectmen have pretty much undertaken this, and it's coming along, I would think, because I know it is an onerous project. This $57,000 is going to focus on the Department of Land Management, and eventually, when they need to look up something, they can simply go online and everything's going to be cataloged, and then they can bring it up. Okay, so what about the treasurer, the assessor's office, the town clerk's office? Are they on the radar?
So, there are a lot of things that are already electronically being done, in the treasurer collector's office, transactions between banking, people are paying online, the documents that they have, I would say, by and large, are more driven by electronics, and they can do that. I would say that this is the start rather than having total upheaval of the building. I think what I to see how this goes for them. Every department has different needs, and I think that your question is quite valid, Committee Member Mazika, because I think when we look at what we can do to make improvements, that would be another place. Remember that we made some huge investments in software to actually bring us up to the modern age, including having with Office of Land Management and a whole e-permitting system, which has, been more predominantly being used in the building commissioner's area, but has to be more widely dispersed. And this was the first year that they actually were, looking to put their applications online, and then also to try to receive payments online. So those are huge steps for a department, believe it or not. And I think that we will take whatever we learn in this area and think about, speaking with each department to see how we can do that. The Office of the Town Clerk is another one that really needed improvements to be brought up to accessibility. Everything was done very rote and in paper for residents and in person. So if we can make some of that more accessible to them, that's important. But there are going to be things that you have to keep originals. And so, and in some originals you can keep that are in the scanned form, and some originals you have to keep in paper form. So, those birth records of those kinds of things that you have to keep in real form. So, I think that we'll try this and see how it goes, but I'll tell you that just looking at scanning large maps and those kinds of things is really important. We used to have a map scanner that is ancient as the hills, and it just took up space up in land management, and we just recently had the request to surplus that. So I'm working on each department trying to get it to snuff, but I think this is the beginning, and hopefully we can migrate it to some other areas.
Now, how long, I was involved in a project similar to this, and how long do you anticipate that it would take this company to get the records that are stored in the building cataloged and scanned and all that kind of stuff? Is this like, can they do this in a matter of, say, 6 months or?
Well, they know sometimes they have to secure the documents for sometimes a minimum of 2 months so that they can actually get to them. And, because some of this is done on site and some of it may be done off site, depending on what the actual request is. So once we put out an actual, bid, we'll have a better understanding. This was to give you some idea from an expert company based on some of the preliminary information. I mean, we gave them, a project scope of assuming there are over 1,490,400 pages that would need to be scanned of documents. And those were, compiled by the company to look at the average rate of about 50 pages per minute or 497 hours to complete a scan, but not including, so it all depends, and once you start talking about maps, sometimes they're jammed right now inside a larger folder and then you have to unfold it. So there's more to this than meets the eye. And I'm hoping that this 57,000 kind of quote is, somewhat accurate, but I won't know until we really start to get the proposals. But I'm hoping, I know we talked about it last year when I had to look at refining my final capital project listing to this committee and to the public for town meeting approval. That was one of the ones that was sacrificed because we had so many projects. So, but this year I'd like to move it forward.
Thank you.
Twice. And this project, 2 different businesses. One encompass 4 states: New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts, and they all have different state laws of retention. One project took 6 months, one took a year. And we did it in conjunction with Iron Mountain, where documents had to be kept in they couldn't just be scanned. They had to be accessible in the original form with signatures, notary, etc. And we gave them the Iron Mountain, and within a day we could retrieve those documents. They indexed them. Separately, all the stuff was done electronically. And what we did, what took time is because of the different states in a property, you can index it so that you can see it by date, you can see it by property. In other words, it isn't ABC. You just don't look up the last name of somebody and get something. You can index it by invoice, you can index it by payment, you can index it by type of permit. And there are a couple of companies that we work with, but the project we found, they were sensitive to 4 different state jurisdictions, New York being the most stringent of the 4 states. And we saved hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it was user-friendly, it was customer-centric, where the customer could access their property, could see their file, number of permits historically. And if somebody needed a document that had to be the original, those were kept off-site. They were warehoused, and it freed up a lot of space. I mean, we had 150 file cabinets, and we got it down to about 20. So that freed up a lot of desk space, a lot of elbow space within the offices that we managed. So this is a project dear to my heart, having done it twice physically. And there are people out there that are very competent, and I'm sure you're talking to them. And we're one state. I did it, and it encompassed 4 states, and everybody had a different rule and a different regulation as far as retention of documents. So my hat's off to you on this project, because I think it's going to really free up a lot of space and give the customer, the property owner, or the developer, the builder, whoever it is, the ability and the flexibility to get hands-on information, and it would be self-serving of them, where they don't have to engage people at town hall to get the information they need. If they have the credentials to do it, they can do it themselves with the proper credentials. And we found that time, it saved not only space, but it saved our people time, where we didn't have to get involved in dealing with retrieving records. So my hat's off to you on this. This is huge payback.
Thank you. Thank you. These are one of those organizational efficiency projects that you start down a road and you really want to complete it because it's very important to the regular work that you do. But sometimes you're so busy that years pass by before you realize that maybe if you had started out in a different pathway, there was a time period where we didn't have the benefit of technology to help us with this. So
Right.
every year and every decade was contingent on what was available at the time. And, people went from just paper and pencil or paper and ink pen to, paper and pencil to, putting them in boxes and then putting them in metal file cabinets. And, the whole routine goes further and further. And pretty soon, you have all of these previous years that you have to contend with. So that's what we would be doing in this beautiful old 1800s building, is trying to bring a little bit of that modernism to make our work easier. The next item that I have on our particular capital project submission for this year that I wanted to talk to you about was something that actually just recently came to bear in the month of November. And that is a request that you'll also, I know the chief of police are going to come to meet with you in December, but this was one of the things that actually percolated up from an overall review that I had commissioned by the company Beltronics, which is now our communications provider. And they had done an analysis across our entire system. And they had looked at everything from the town hall to dispatch, the fire department, our communication sites, the water tank, the Federal Hill sites, IPG voter site. And I was asking for a way to look at all of these individual needs that we might have so we could put them on our capital planning. I do have some smaller figures, which I believe I'll be able to place within our operating budget, both in police and fire, to take care of potentially in the future. But this one became apparent where we have two 911 dispatch consoles, and we had one of them which actually had gone down, and we could not, when I was no longer functioning. And we had an incident where we could not get the parts because the consoles, believe it or not, are fairly outdated now, and the parts are no longer supported with the newer types of consoles that they have. The problem here is we have a very highly active dispatch center. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it was initially put in the overall review, although it wasn't on my radar right away. Now it's become more important to place on the radar. Now, just so that you know, the chief and I had a lot of discussion about this, and I had tried to reach out to my grant contacts, especially those with the large E911 centers. And one of the things we discovered is because the E911 line was not compromised, but rather the equipment that feeds that information, it wouldn't necessarily be covered by a grant. So that's not good. But if we don't start dealing with it now, we could find ourselves in a predicament that none of us wants to. So the overall cost, as you can see in your packets that I provided, there are two potential way to go on this. One of them would be to actually replace, and this is the other thing, you can't replace one and not speak to one another. So especially when they have multiple incidents going on at once. So we would need to do these in tandem. But the two figures that you see, one would be actually replacing both those dispatch consoles that have 12 radio channels along with the auxiliary I&O, that would be like $131,470. And then the other option is a little bit more money, $146,881, but that doesn't just give you what you had there, but it also allows laptops to be able to take and have the same information that's actually being fed through the emergency dispatch consoles to a laptop that can be used in our when we actually activate our emergency operations center. And so right now, believe it or not, we have a lot of that is done by telephone. We had an incident, I was present when we had a lot of trees going down in that storm, the hurricane tropical storm. And, we were getting our feedback that way through telephone. So there might be ways to actually make improvements here that would help us with our command center operability as well. So I am putting that as a priority project. How we'll fund it, I don't know yet, but I will continue to look for different potential grant opportunities. But I know that the chief, has sent a letter, but he'll speak to that as well. But there are some smaller things that I hope to maybe also include and get done so that we are really, have what I consider to be the most up-to-date systems in place that will provide both the emergency response personnel with the confidence of the work that they're doing, but more importantly, also let our residents have that continued confidence for the work that our dispatch center does. And of course, they're the first contact for any kind of emergency situation. And like I said, I think if you have really detailed questions about that, I think the chief would be excellent to be able to, but I just wanted to also put it out there because I want you to know that I also support that. And we've been working with both our dispatch, our police, our fire, on looking at all of the frailties that we had for a number of years for our radio communications, and we've been addressing them piece by piece. Now, we had gotten a legislative grant last year, which helped us be able to address some of that. That was a $75,000 state grant. And so we'll continue to work in ways that we can to bring in whatever financial resources. But sometimes we just, as a community, it's part of what our responsibility is too. And then the last thing I had to present to you.
On this,
sorry, Mr. Chairman, I apologize.
I know we have a lot of dead spots in the community, and I think the last time we looked at it to correct that dead spot issue was about $800,000 with towers, et cetera, and repeaters. But of course, I know things are evolving with 5G, and I know it's still in its infancy. So I mean, to take the long view on this, I would hope that, and I'm sure you're going to with electronics, look at stuff that's going to be compatible with the future, so that we're not spending that dollar a second time, and making sure that we can take advantage of whatever 5G brings to us, and the equipment can accept it and interact with it going forward. So I just want to, as a cautionary note, make sure that we're considering that, because there's going to be some opportunities in the next 2 to 3 years where a lot of these, like the dead spots, and a lot of these things will be issues that will be addressed without us spending $800,000.
So I think those are both, there's two things there, Mr. Chairman, if I might, and I think you're correct on looking at the most efficient and cost savings way to do things. First of all, what might, that we changed our provider and our experts for radio communications overall. We did replace a large antenna, which has and also addressed some of our repeater problems we were having, and also things that related to the actual communications infrastructure at the police department and the DPW. That has actually improved the ability of the staff to communicate, and that has addressed a lot of the issues that we had, along with upgrading what was existing in our DPW trucks as well. And so those dead spots have actually improved markedly by the infrastructure improvements we just did this past year. Having said as much, there were estimates, very high estimates of 800,000 and the like. Even if we were looking at replacing some of those major pieces, it's not amounting to that type of cost. Some of the estimates that have been put forward are much less than that, more like half that. So I think that going forward, we will take it each step by step, what really needs to be done, and then look at ones that may be able to be put off and then put in the queue and find various ways of being able to fund it. At the end of the day, the issue of 5G, I'm glad you brought it up. I just had a conversation with our brand new Director of Planning and Economic Development. For those of you who haven't met him, his name is Mr. Tony Sousa. He comes to us with a lot of experience. He's actually finalizing his draft that he'll be presenting, and then I'll be presenting it to our attorneys about having an actual overall plan for 5G should we have to contend with it. There's a lot of things from the FEC and the laws that relate to what towns can and cannot do, and we want to have actually a blueprint in place in case that we actually have to, comply with requests that may come for implementing 5G. It's not as easy as it sounds, and without having a plan and our own standards in place, we could actually be fleeced, so to speak, by not having what we would want to get from the individual companies that may actually try to put it up. So, Mr. Chairman, since you asked about it, I'll make sure to share that with you and the rest of the board. But that is not to say that we're going to have 5G tomorrow, but what it is to say we're going to use our experience of our new planning and economic development director to prepare our town so that we might be able to handle that additional infrastructure and maybe complement, areas that would be good for us. And, whether it's free Wi-Fi through the town or something more serious like working with our actual first responders on improving our communications ability, I think we'll have some opportunities to sort of put those things concretely in a plan. So it's a very timely question, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. And hopefully, we'll have something, I believe, very near future after speaking with Mr. Sousa today.
Great.
I'll be able to share. So thank you for that question.
Great. Next item.
Okay, and the last project I have to share with the Finance Committee relates to a wireless digital communications board. And I wanted to let you know that this has come to my attention from town hall employees and our first responders, and also has been brought to a heightened sense because I did apply for a technology grant in hopes that we could get some partial funding for this. I'm speaking about our board that's out in front of our town hall, which is our beautiful marquee style letter board. As you can see, we have different sized letters and we have very limited space. This was pretty much, if you look at the brick, it was probably constructed in the 1950s. And obviously it sense of charm, but it really has hamstrung us, particularly in this era of dealing with the pandemic, on being able to actually communicate with the public in real time, or as real time as possible. Claire Wilson, our former treasurer collector, she kept saying to me, if there's anything that you can do before I retire, I would love to have a board out there that, we don't have to trudge out into the snow and try to open it up and put the letters up, or find one of the custodians that can do us when we're piled high with snow. And as you can see, you can get about one message on either side. And that doesn't help you when you have really other things that you would like to share. And so this is another example that I think that we could do something very much to improve our communications ability. Don't forget, our master plan also talks about giving the downtown, the village atmosphere, and also to communicate better, to have both pedestrians and people frequent our downtown. And I do know people look at this board. It's just that the board is very one-dimensional, and it doesn't take to heart how much we've advanced as a society for being able to share communication. So this project that I'm putting in for potential funding need is in the amount of $51,412. Now, you have to understand that the technology itself is not inexpensive. As you can see, I gave you a proposed budget that I put together for our entire grant proposal. And, and it has everything from the digital screen enclosures, which is what you see up here now. Believe not, that has a whole aspect to it, which has both heat, moisture, cooling abilities, but we also have, was for our grant proposal. There are different varieties of this. Here's one particular variety that you see at a town hall. I think we could do much better in terms of what ours would look like, but it's just to give you ideas. So right now, I've been, told by our Community Compact Grant Authority that, there may be, potential to find another avenue for this, because it really does hamper our ability to communicate about, important public health issues, important voting issues, anything that relates to what we do. So right now we're really limited. We have to try to go on Facebook, or we try to use our town website, but not everybody has a computer. Not everybody looks at that. You see what you have in front of you now on screen. that's an example of the type of three-dimensional color that we would be looking to try to do to capture people's attention, so that, you know, you don't just have the senior newsletter and the Facebook posting, then you all of a sudden have people driving by and saying, geez, I didn't realize today was the last day to get a flu shot. You know, these are kinds of things that I think we're showing here that we have used for notifying the public. We just can't do that on that board. So, you know, people always, I can't tell you how many calls my office gets about the Rocky Hill waste drop off, the bulk drop off days. You know, we would be able to, I think, really help the community with some of the information we're trying to communicate. My hope is that with a one particular grant avenue, that we could at least get the technology piece done, which could be anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000. The rebuilding of the monument might be something that we bear the cost of. So this is an estimate. It's not even to say right now that that's exactly what we would buy, but I'm looking more towards, you know, something that might be what we call a more advanced version in terms of pixelation for digital electronic board that would allow us to access it wirelessly. And, you know, every department would be able to get their information up rather quickly, and we'd be able to rotate that, and it would be able to be seen by pedestrians and drivers alike. And so I hope that we can do that. I hope that I can sometime have our retired treasurer collector come back and help cut the ribbon, because I would love to be able to do that, because it was one of the things that was something that she brought my attention to. As charming as our board is for Marquee, it's long overdue for needing to be replaced. And I would tell you that the town of Millbury did one downtown. If you've ever been through the center, you see it's very charming. It's almost like a little railroad depot. I think that the technology has advanced in terms of pixelation. I would want to have something that actually looks more like what you just saw, that has, you know, better color ability and readability. And I think we could achieve that and keep it within the look of this building. And we have talked with some sign makers who also build monuments. That's what they call that, a monument sign, is what we have out there now, that would be more in keeping with the brick and the things that we have here. I've been told by the sign makers that the original foundation that exists out there now is a much earlier brick version, and it's not even the type of brick that would complement the existing 1870s building that we're in for the town hall. But this would be very important to our first responders in getting messages out, town manager getting out emergency messages. It would also be very important to just getting out regular things that we want to enhance the public's attention and desire to be able to participate. And I think that would be a really good thing. And I think aesthetically, it would also help complement the goals of the master plan. And that would include my submissions for this year. Obviously, I'll be answering questions as each department goes forward before you to articulate those. And perhaps when we make the final decisions about what the plans will be, I'm here all the time to answer any questions that you have as you get those presentations done before you. And obviously, if any questions come after those presentations, I'm here to address them as well. I thank you for your attention. You've been wonderfully attentive. I thank you very much for your attention.
To recap your request for FY22, it looks like $405,589, if I've done my math right. Schools already come before us with requests for FY22 of $855,500. Fire and EMS, $763,000. So with the three department areas reporting to date, we're looking at pending request of $2,024,089 to date. So that's where we are right now. Anybody have any other thoughts or questions? For the town manager on tonight's presentation? None. As far as old business goes, since last week we attempted to have a meeting, didn't have a quorum, but the police chief did share some information with us regarding his thoughts on that $763,000. And his request basically were for two items. One was to replace town manager engine 4 and rescue 1, which two vehicles. And being able to, and that also included a new airlift back, which was 40,000, which both these items, the airlift and the replacement of the two vehicles to one, was on last year's request. So it's 685, where last year it was 650. But there was also a request for hoses and nozzles, and coming off some of the equipment coming off one of the two vehicles that are consolidated into one, he felt that some of that equipment could be reallocated, and that would eliminate or put a big dent in that 40,000 request for hoses and stuff. And then there was the replacement of Rescue 3 for 78. And he was going to he's going to retain the 2000 Ford F350 for plowing. And the other request was for North Station, and he indicated that the building improvement fund had, and I noticed as I drive by there, the North Station is now activated, which is great for the other part of Oxford and reaching it in a timely manner. So that request that he had on his request last year is being met through the building improvement funds. So that was it. Another thing, and of course, last fall meeting, we approved the command vehicles. So
Yes.
6,000. So we made a dent in a lot of his areas, either through building improvements for the North Station, the command vehicles at fall meeting. And that's where he was. School department has a lot of requests with regard to Clara Barton and to Chafee School. And they total on building repairs about 665,000. You with your green initiative of 247, that would bring a total request of maintaining or keeping those two buildings accessible about 913,000. I do have a concern looking at the utilization of those four buildings, school buildings, and the money we're putting into it going forward. Again, future, based on what the superintendent has shared with us both publicly in the Webster Times and here at this meeting, with school utilization, the school enrollment going forward. It appears that over a period of time, we're going to, they're estimating we're going to have an enrollment that's going to be around 1,300. And we have a capacity with the four buildings to educate 3,200. So we're going to be under 50% utilization.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, and I'm saying, for future plans, looking at all the buildings that we have and trying to maintain, we need to look ahead in the future to see what our needs are going to be, and are we spending money, good money, in the right areas? Do we need the facilities in the future? It appears that our school enrollment is going to continue to decline, and I'm wondering if there should be some building consolidation. And the other thing they mentioned, the school department, which we didn't touch on, was the coffee building coming available and the possibility of turning that back over to the town. And I didn't know what your thoughts were on that as regard to utilization of the coffee building in light of all these different facilities and the cost, the one-time cost of building it, but the ongoing cost of maintaining it, which is a lot larger going forward. And I'm looking at what our utilization factor is, and we're going to be under 50%. We're pre-pandemic as far as what we can educate and what we're educating, and the cost of those four buildings, especially Chafee and Barton School, $1 million. I mean, are we going to be able to utilize those buildings to the town's advantage going forward? So that's my observation at this point, having listened to both the school superintendent as far as what the future brings as far as number of enrollments and the cost of these buildings as far as bringing them up to what they feel would be adequate. So your thoughts, and then with the coffee building, have you had any discussions on any of this?
Yeah, one of the things, I'm sorry, that I didn't actually articulate in the Green Communities Plan is at one point they state when they did a review a number of years ago had also included the coffee building for LED lighting replacement. And the thing about the coffee buildings themselves, they're modular buildings. The Jocelyn Annex that we're now actually taking down because they're beyond not only their usefulness, but they're actually so deteriorated that the only thing that's worth keeping is the foundation, which, I've spoken to the DPW that even if we have to cap the foundation after taking the building down, we may have a repurposed use for that. And if we can do that, that would be great. But the building itself needs to come down. The Project Coffee buildings are not quite as severe, but I'd say they're pretty severe. And I'm saying that the Joslyn Annex School was so severe with the T111 rotting and the roof, it was deplorable. So I know that I took it off my Green Communities plan because I had discussions with the superintendent, giving it back to the town for what kind of purpose. I think we need to really take a look at those two buildings and what they could be used for and in the location that they're in and what they have for utilities. I'm told that, the buildings themselves are not in great shape and have been used mainly as some storage, but certainly we'll be having that discussion. I was not prepared tonight to kind of talk to you about that, but, I will assure you that we'll have those discussions. And I do think that the superintendent, along with the school committee, just like every other school committee and superintendent across the Commonwealth and across the region, we are all very cognizant of the declining enrollments. And I think communities like ours will have to make determinations how to best go forward. Some of those declining enrollments might really impact us at a 10-year period of time. Some communities are more hard hit, depending on whether they have large mobilization in and out of their community. I think for our community, we may have some more time to bide before we have to make some larger scale decisions. But I think it would be, prudent as we go forward to sort of look at that. Schools typically have, consultants come in and look at enrollment to justify the building of new schools. I think as we go forward, we might also need to think about the very conversation about declining enrollment and what does that mean for the look and the pattern of public education that we would provide to this community. So I do think we're going to have those conversations going forward. I can't say what they are right now, but certainly the Finance Committee in the future would be looped in on that. And I do think that the conversation that I'll have about the Project Coffee buildings will be more soon rather than later. And it's because it's become a priority for them to figure out what to do with that structure. And so we'll take a look and see if it has any applicability to be used or repurposed. And if we can do that, that's great. If not, it may not, serve in the best interest of the town to just keep having a structure that eventually becomes like the Joslyn Annex, where it falls down. So we want to make sure that we have a real purpose for it and that it's going to be used if that's the case. So we're going to have those discussions, and I certainly will get back to the chairman and the Finance Committee as we go forward with that. But I did.
The reason I bring it up,
What was that? I'm sorry.
We're looking at a lot of capital requests regarding these, and and I know at $2 million, we'll have only 3 departments reporting so far, with more to come.
Yes.
We got to prioritize where we're going to spend the money. If we don't want to spend money on something that we're not going to need in, say, 3 years or 4 years, and if it's $1 million, that's the only reason I bring it up now, because the requests are here now before us today.
Well, that's why I put out the time frame. I think, when you talk about potentially not looking at, real true consolidation imperatives, until 10 years out, then, $700,000 to $1 million may make sense right now, and not waiting to say, well, we got to come up with a whole new way of moving everybody and transforming everything. I will tell you that I think in the era of the pandemic, there's been a lot of things that will get reviewed and reevaluated on the way that we deliver services, the way we deliver public education. And I think all of those things will be considered in totality. And we're living in an era now where we can't consider all of the different things that we have to prepare for, including not necessarily having the same foundational footprint that we thought we needed in being able to deliver public services and programs and also education and our even our fire and police response. So I think all of those things will be looked at as we go forward. And I just am just hoping that we can get through these next several months, which I know are going to continue to be very taxing on us, as a community with the pandemic. So just ask for your patience, as we try to look at all of these things. I will say that I'm very proud of the work that we've done, the finance director, myself, and looking at chasing revenues down. Once again, we have a really wonderful, solid number for our free cash this year to have available to be able to put towards both our savings and our capital projects to prevent having to put that burden on the taxpayers for these very important projects. All of these important projects are important, but we know that we have limited means. And so, my responsibility has been to try to make improvements in our financial picture so that we have a greater ability to fund some of these projects and not defer them out year after year after year, so that the point we can do them, they become more costly, or they've outlived what we thought was going to be important for their usefulness. So, I think we're doing an excellent job in being able to provide resources to address these actually very important projects. And the only way we can do that is because we're in really a very good financial picture right now, and much better than even when I arrived. So I'm happy about that. And one-time revenues should be used for one-time projects and resources that are important to us, and also should be put away for our savings in case we need to continue to look at larger scale things. And that number is going up in our stabilization. We've put our first dollars towards our capital stabilization, and our reserves overall are much healthier today than they were almost 3 years ago. So stay tuned. I know that we have a lot of projects, and that's why I need all of your wisdom to help me frame what's most important on any given year, and also listen to the sage advice of what's happening on the larger trends, both outside of this community and inside this community. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the question.
And I appreciate your effort on grants. I think that's gone a long way. And I think you last year with this community grant, green grant, I don't know if everybody really appreciated the magnitude over the next 5 years that we're going to benefit by in the million. I think it was $1.8 million. I don't want to misspeak, but I think it was like $1.8 million that we're going to. And I think that's a coup to you and your team and getting that, and the other grants that you've been able to get, because we can't do it by taxation alone and by state aid. There's no way. The needs are just too many. So my hat's off to you and your team for getting that amount of money last year. I don't think it might have gone a little bit under the radar, and I'd like to bring it. And then we talked about it at tonight.
Thank you.
A great coup.
Thank you. A lot that has transpired in the last 9 months, and not all of it's been very easy. And our attention has been not just focused on the pandemic, but continuing to try to meet, the deadlines, the, funding opportunities, all of that. There have been many a night where we go home, as always, not on time. So, but that comes with the job of trying to be inventive, trying to be creative, working with a committee like you to try to come up and frame with what's most important to the community. So I appreciate that. And I know I've had offline conversations with individual members on this committee, and I appreciate that. And I always appreciate the feedback that you give. And I know that our finance director does as well. I can see her down in the lower corner there. So I just want to give tribute to the excellent work that's being done to afford us a very healthy perspective in addressing our capital needs. We certainly wouldn't be doing that with a financial picture that wasn't as healthy as the one we have. The other thing I just wanted to leave you with is that this was another year where we actually, in record time, were able to set our tax rate, actually do our financial audit, which the report just came back, and to certify our free cash. And that all has put us in an excellent financial position to not only talk about our capital needs now so that we can get them firmed up for this spring, but it's also allowing me to figure out ways that we will have to address the potential looming shortfall that could come from that state that might not have come in such a severe tone as we had anticipated or were told. But I do anticipate we're going to continue to be under the thumb of this pandemic financially. And so, this is very helpful to me to have a really strong understanding, and I know it does to our finance director as well, to do the next planning, which is to address all the operational budget needs. So I know you'll be tackling that with me, and I greatly appreciate it too.
And I know you're working at a grant for the pandemic that you were early on.
Yes.
Hopefully that's what bear fruit. And I know you hired the top people to go ahead and pursue those monies if and when they are available. So I know we're in the queue.
We have received some of that, and you know what, you're raising a good question. I think both the finance director and I, as we start to talk about the budget going into January, we can give you an update on how we've fared so far in getting actual funding for the needs that we had to actually pursue to address this pandemic. So thank you. That's a good thing. I think we will be in a better position after the first of the year to tell you what has taken place. And I think the finance committee would appreciate understanding that endeavor has been quite onerous on all the departments, the manager, and most definitely our finance director, in keeping things focused and to find out what pot we can pay certain things out of. And we've done well with the grants there. We've done well with some DPH grants that I've filed that have helped us with contact tracing. So, you know, all of that is really very positive, and it's a good message that we've got ourselves focused on the right things. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll give you that update sometime after January 1st.
Thank you, Town Manager. Any questions of the Town Manager? All right. And any new business? Other than, I think our next meeting, if there's none, is what, next week, December the 9th?
Yep,
And I don't know who's going to be before us.
police chief.
Police chief will be before us?
Mhm.
Okay. Any questions? All right. Thoughts, comments? If none, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I hear a second.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Yule,
Yes.
Miss Mazeka,
Yes.
Miss O'Neill,
Yes.
Miss Wozniak.
Yes.
All right. We need to adjourn. Thank you, everybody.